Well, welcome to Freedom Night. How is everybody tonight? Doing good. Doing good. I love this time of year. I know it's not quite as cool as I would like it, but fall is my absolute favorite time of year. Anybody else here like fall? I just love it. Something about that entire, watching the leaves change. I'm from Florida originally, so everything there is green and brown or browner. So to be able to watch the seasons change and the fall leaves is just a beautiful thing. I see we have quite a few of you guys. What, Grateful Life Center here tonight representing? Yep. Welcome. We want to take a minute too and welcome those watching online. We want to welcome the brave women of the Braden Recovery Center. We're so excited you could be with us tonight, and we are just so honored to be able to spend this time with you. We want to welcome those watching from Drogi as well. Let's give it up for Drogi. I honestly could not think of anywhere else I'd rather be tonight than spending this time with you. I'm thankful that you guys are willing to give up your time, and I'm excited about what we can learn together. Speaking of learning things together, I have just this weird thing about me that I'm just curious, and I'm always Googling stuff and looking up articles on things and picking up books, and I just love to learn about this world and about the beautiful people that inhabit it. And I was doing some research on some things, and basically the theme of it came together, and it was just really cool, and I thought maybe I would share that with you guys tonight if you're okay with that. What this really has to do with is it has to do with how we make it in life and the choices that we make, and sometimes how we can be blind to the choices we actually have, and I talked a little bit about just loving this fall weather and campfires, and how many of you guys remember telling scary stories around the campfire? How many of you guys got scared? How many of you guys are the ones scaring people? Yeah, I figured that would be you. But those stories we especially connect to stories for some reason. So scientists have figured out that when we hear a story, beginning, middle, and end, it creates a release of a chemical in our brain that actually makes us feel really good. And it's like we're hardwired for story. Now, I remember my grandmother used to watch what she called her stories, her soap operas, right? And you did not bother my grandmother, right, during General Hospital, All My Children. You did not exist during those hours of the day. Don't call. She wouldn't answer. If you were there and dared to comment or she'd throw her slipper at you. So you just didn't mess with it. You really didn't. And she would get so into it too, and talking to the TV like the people are real, and they're she's actually, these are things that are happening, and later in the day washing dishes and just mad at something that happened, and I don't know how she can marry that guy, doesn't he know, da-da-da, like it's a real thing, but we kind of do that too. You guys ever get upset about how a show ends for the season? Or maybe they do something with a character that they kill the character off, or somebody leaves somebody or breaks up with somebody, and you're like, no, and you're yelling at the TV. Or you're watching a scary movie, and the person's headed for a room, right? They hear a noise, and you're like, call 911. No, they're heading in. The guy's got a chainsaw. We all know it. We're screaming at the girl, don't do it. Don't go in there, right? We do that. And why is that? We're upset because the storyline's not going the way we think it should go. Characters aren't behaving the way we want them to, right? And we'll go to work the next day and talk about how this, that, and whatever on that show, like it's a real thing. Like it's something that actually bothers us. We get upset about it when things don't go the way we think they should. But, a lot of us do that in our own lives. We have a very distinct idea of how our lives should go. We have a very specific, thought-out version of how we think the storyline of our lives should play out, and of who we should be, of how others should treat us, of how things should have gone. And when we're hit with something that's not in our version of how we pictured it, when something happens that we weren't expecting, when we experience loss or tragedy, when we make mistakes, when we mess things up, when someone does us wrong, or when we're faced with heartache and difficulty, we're like, no, that's not right. That's not how this isn't how this story's supposed to go. This is wrong. This isn't what I signed up for. Somebody needs to fix this. This isn't how I thought it would play out. And we're so attached to the thought and the idea, all that raw emotion, that, no, this isn't how it's supposed to go. When depression hits and all of a sudden you feel like you just can't get out of bed, like nothing and no one matters and there's no hope, it's never going to be any better. When anxiety has you in its clutches and it's brutal in its assault on your thoughts and you feel paralyzed by the things running through your mind, you're afraid and don't even know why. Do you know depression impacts 16.1 million adults? That's 18 over 16.1 million. Anxiety disorders pass depression in terms of the most diagnoses of mental illness in this country. Anxiety disorders affect 40 million adults in the U.S. alone. Mental illness has affected my family greatly. I can speak from personal experience about what that looks like. Not a lot of people want to talk about that. They don't want to deal with that. It's impacted even my children. I'll never forget New Year's Eve heading into 2008. My 13-year-old daughter and I were sitting in the intake of a children's psychiatric hospital. Earlier that day, she had come to me. I just made lunch, and she said, "I know you poisoned my sandwich." And I said, "What?" She said, "I know you poisoned my lunch." I called her counselor, and she said, "Get her to a hospital." We began a process that lasted long into the night, her being evaluated. She was hearing voices that she thought was God telling her to kill herself. Her mind and her emotions had broken the same way you can break an arm or a leg. I'll never forget driving home that night. I had to leave her there. She was strip searched, put in a room with a metal door that locked down. I looked in her eyes, and she wasn't there anymore. That wasn't my little girl. And I remember just this feeling, overwhelming grief. And I'm driving home, and it's New Year's Eve, and I'm coming through Cincinnati, and there are fireworks going off. Fireworks. And I just want somebody to make my little girl better. It's been a long journey. Happy to say it's one that she's winning. But what do we do when the ideal life, the ideal version of our story of who we're supposed to be doesn't pan out? How do we handle it? How do we cope? And you know, in doing my research, I found out that we all have something in common when it comes to responding to the circumstances in our lives. All of us, every one of us, become storytellers. We create stories to explain how or why this particular thing happened in our life. We create stories to explain who we are and why we do the things we do. And listen to me, it's the kind of story that we choose to tell that ends up determining ultimately whether we thrive and make it in life or whether we wither up and die. And so many of us tell stories that do not serve us well. We create scenarios to explain the events of our lives that actually hinder us from seeing the things we need to see to move forward in life and to experience a full life. And we all want a life of purpose. The problem's not desiring that. We all want to live a life that we're excited about, to get up in the morning. We're looking forward to the day. We all want to live a life where we're loved and know we are loved. We all want to belong. But our stories, the ones that we tell to ourselves and to others, can actually box us in and limit us and prevent us from seeing exactly what we need to see to live that kind of life. It can prevent us. The story we tell can prevent us from seeing the true picture. So the first problem is that we believe the way we are seeing it is the only way to see it. We look at the circumstance in our life, we look at what's going on, and we think that our version is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The reality is that very often what we think is real, what we think is happening, what we think is reality, has little to do with what's actually going on, has little to do with truth. Don't believe me? How many of you guys have seen a show called American Idol? Raise your hand. All right, we got something. Hey, you want to play that now?
Don't let the sun go down on me yet. Although I search myself, there's always someone else I see. I just allow a fragment of your life to wander free. Oh, but losing everything is like the sun going down on me.
Sorry.
That's good.
Sorry. Roland.
I've never seen laugh so hard.
I even think you would do badly in Kosovo Idol. I mean, that was absolutely horrific.
Okay, so there's just one small example of how someone can think there's a truth and think there's a reality, when in fact the person is actually fairly disconnected from what the truth is, right? I always wonder why these people let their friends let them go on American Idol. Like I'm sorry. I don't want to ditch your dream, but you cannot sing. Do not do that to yourself, right? Well, that's a funny example, but you know what? That's true in our lives. Often we really believe things in the core of who we are. We've bought into something that says things are this way. This is why this happened. This is who I am. This is how life goes. And it's really not reality at all. And sometimes it's a matter of just not seeing the whole picture, not seeing everything that is actually there. So what you're focused on is actually true, but you're not seeing everything present. You're blind to some things. And so what you're looking at isn't the whole story. You end up with a skewed perspective. You guys all have on your table a piece of paper with a picture on it. I think they're going to throw that up on the screen, too, for those of you watching online. This is just a little illustration of how you can be looking at something and not see everything. I'm going to ask you guys to look at that, and somebody just call out what you see. You see her. Who sees a young lady? Let me see your hands. Okay. How many of you see the old woman? She looks like a hag, kind of looks like a witch. How many of you can see both? Isn't that something? Now, we were sitting before Freedom Night tonight with a couple of the volunteers, and there's some of them insisting there is no old lady in that picture. Does not. I took a pen, drew it around. Nope, don't see it. Isn't that funny? But our minds do that same thing that optical illusion shows us is possible. We gather information that makes sense to us, and we grab onto it, and we lock down on this is truth. When in reality, both images appear within that picture. So for the next few Fridays, guys, if it's all right with you, we're going to talk about how to be the ultimate master storyteller and how to take control of our story, own our story, and create storylines that propel us towards health and well-being, storylines that will allow us to experience healing and growth, one that will enable us to identify our potential and actually grow into it. Are you guys ready? Are you with me? All right. First thing we have to do to take charge of and control of our story, the first thing we have to do is we have to set a realistic stage upon which to live out our stories. And what do I mean by that? I mean, what is the background? What's the situational setting for what you're experiencing as you're living your life? What backdrop do you have to play the events of your lives against? The stages that we set, so to speak, or that we create often really represent our expectations of how we think things should be as we go about living our lives. So these expectations are ideas in our head of what life is supposed to be like, of how we're supposed to be, and we create all kinds of stages and settings in our mind. And honestly, the truth is most of the time these are very idealistic, perfectionistic, sort of airbrushed versions of reality, and they don't reflect the way that real life actually unfolds. You see, the reality is no matter who you are, white, black, rich, poor, young, old, no matter who you are, where you were born, what it is your background is or isn't, both beautiful and tragic things will happen to you in this life. You will experience both gain and loss, both joy and sorrow. You will experience pain that you did not deserve, and you will also experience wonderful things that you did not earn. There will be both life and death in your story. The life and the death of dreams, of people, of relationships, of chapters and seasons in your life. Jesus said it like this in John 16:33, here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows. Boy, there was no sugarcoating that. And he didn't even just say trials and sorrows, many trials and sorrows. So Jesus was trying to give us a clue. And so often we think, you know what, if we believe in God, if we have a relationship with Jesus, if we invite him into our world and into our life, that things are supposed to get fixed, right? And bad things aren't supposed to happen. And if they do, then we must have done something somewhere, somehow. No, Jesus said, here on earth, you will have many trials and sorrows. And he told us to take comfort and have courage because he has overcome the world, which lets us know that at some point in time, there's a victory coming. But in the meantime, our expectation should be that there's going to be trouble. There are going to be things that affect and impact our life. There's going to be both good and bad experiences. There is no perfect life. No life that is absent of sorrow or loss. No perfect you does not exist, not anywhere for anyone. Tragedy hits, heartache hits, loss hits, depression hits, anxiety hits, addiction hits. Our mistakes, our flaws, our imperfections are a given in this world. We will not make it through this life without experiencing failure and loss. If we are to take charge of our story, we must first acknowledge these truths and understand that it's how we respond to these circumstances that tells the real story. We have to set our stage and our expectations accordingly. Our lives will not be perfect, and neither will we. We will make mistakes, but we are also capable of learning from them. We will regret some decisions, but we can know we are free to choose to work towards making better choices the next time around. And in this life, we may experience significant loss, but we can be assured that just as soon as there are seasons of mourning, there will be seasons of joy, and in time we will heal and find a life worth living on the other side of that loss. People may let us down, but there will also be people in our lives that will lift us up. You see, when we refuse to acknowledge this reality that both wonderful and horrible things are present in this life, when we insist that no, this should not be, this cannot be, life is supposed to be fun and easy and carefree. I should not struggle with addiction. I should not struggle financially. I should not experience hardship in my relationships. When we hang on to perfectionistic standards and compare ourselves to those idealistic, false ideas of how life should be, we will find ourselves stuck, angry, full of shame, blaming ourselves and others for those experiences and unable to move past them. Listen to me, you do not have to carry the burden of blame and shame. You do not have to allow them to be your companions in this journey you are on. You have a choice in how you respond to the imperfections of this world and the imperfections of you. The shame you've been carrying, you can choose to set that down. The blame that's weighing on you, you can choose to let that go. The anger at the unfairness of it and the injustice of it, you can choose to release that, to forgive, to turn the page, start a new chapter. You know, if you're here tonight and you're struggling with depression, I cannot tell you why depression is your battle, but I can tell you for certain it's not your fault. I can tell you as well that if you allow yourself to be consumed by the unfairness of it, stuck in the anger and the question of why would life hand this to me, if you're stuck with the should-bes and comparing yourself to others, you will be unable to move towards health. But if instead you choose to set a realistic stage for your life, realistic expectations, you'll be able to see the choices that are available to you in responding to that depression. And you will grow from the experience, from a realistic set of expectations. When you set a real stage one that acknowledges the good and the bad. You can say, hey, I know that both health and sickness will be included in this journey, both well-being and illness, both good and bad. This battle is not my fault, but it is my fight. And I choose to believe that this battle is mine because I can win it. I'm not alone. 16.1 million people in this country are also fighting the same battle against depression. You can choose to say, I'm going to reach out to connect. I'm going to gather resources. I'm going to learn how to do the things I need to do to beat this thing. I may fall down, but I will get back up. And I can promise you I will never, ever, ever give up. Setting a realistic stage is all about adjusting our expectations. Are you with me so far? Next, we have to take a look at our explanations. So we've looked at our expectations. Now we're going to look at our explanations, or the themes that we use to explain ourselves, our situations, our behavior. It's really important that we learn to recognize the themes of our stories and adjust them as needed. You see, we often adopt scenarios with themes to explain our decisions, our experiences, our circumstances, and though we may not realize that after time, when we lock into those themes, and we believe in them, when we really buy into them, those themes and the way we explain ourselves actually become a habit. They become our default setting for how we explain our lives. So the theme of I'm a loser becomes the default theme, an explanation for everything that goes wrong, no matter what it is. I'm a loser. The theme of I'm not smart enough becomes the default explanation for every time we are challenged to learn something new, and becomes the way we explain why we give up. We default to these, failing to realize they're just a habit built from lies. They're not the truth. And the odd thing is, we are often quite unbalanced in our explanations and our themes. We default to themes that have a negative slant to them. We provide negative judgments about ourselves to explain the bad things, but we often do not bother with developing positive things to explain the good things that go right. Research shows that when we have this sort of a tendency to lean towards the negative, that we'll actually credit the good things to happen to chance or a fluke. So in other words, we develop this habit, this default setting of saying, this bad thing happened because of me, it's my fault. But we rarely say, this good thing happened because of me, it's my fault. When is the last time you really celebrated and congratulated yourself on something that you did that caused something to go well for you? When's the last time you said, I did well on this or that or whatever it might be because I practiced, I studied, I asked for help, I hunkered down, I worked it out, I paid attention, I refused to give up? This tendency to take total credit for the bad things and our blind spot to how we contribute to the good things is so prevalent that the most common default is that we focus on the lack in our lives, what we don't have or who we aren't. We focus on fixing our flaws instead of maximizing our strengths. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that literally just a crazy way to go at life? Taking a magnifying glass to everything we don't have or everything we think we aren't, instead of focusing on those things that we are that really work for us. The most common theme in our human story, backed up by social science research, the most common theme in our human story is that we are not enough. Not capable enough, not strong enough, not smart enough, not rich enough, not together enough, not educated enough. Fill in the blank. As a matter of fact, on your table you have a piece of paper that has exactly that. I want everybody to take 10 seconds. Fill that blank in. I am not blank enough. And then right after that, you have the next sentence that says, I love that I am blank. And I want you to fill in a character trait there. And I will bet you guys money that you instantly knew what to fill in the blank of not being enough, and that you will struggle and sit here and have to think a bit before you can come up with a positive character trait to put down in that sentence. And when we say that we're not whatever enough, what we're really saying is that we're not perfect. Nobody is everything enough. The problem is we've set the bar at perfection. So what we're saying is we don't measure up to the ideal standard we have set for ourselves or how we think we should be, and just add to it, comparing it to anybody and everybody else in the world, and you've got a recipe for disaster and a sure way to stay stuck where you are forever. Other common themes in our human story are: I am alone. I am the only one who has to deal with this or that issue. Because of this thing, this situation, this event, I'm unlovable, I'm undesirable. Things will always be this way. And nothing I do makes a difference. So I'm going to teach you guys an important tool tonight in taking charge of your story and owning it. You need to name the themes. You need to look for and recognize those themes. And then you can say, oh, yep, here's mine. Nobody has it as bad as me theme. Catch yourself storytelling with a destructive theme and then choose a better theme. Then the nobody has it as bad as me theme becomes, as bad as things are, I know in reality there are a lot of people in this world that are worse off than me. As difficult as this is, as hard as this is, I still have things to be grateful for. And if you really want to add a kick and a punch to that, name 3 things that you're grateful for right there, right then and there. If you have trouble figuring out something you're grateful for, ask yourself, if there were to be something missing from my life or absent from my life that would make a difference, what would that be? If your home were gone, I don't care where you're living at, there's a roof over your head, you got something to praise God for. Take a look at the evening news. Take a look at Harvey and Irma and Maria. 10 seconds of the evening news will give you things that you can be thankful for and grateful for. It's about identifying those themes that are destructive, that are not serving us well, that we are choosing. So we're becoming conscious of the things, the choices we have, and the themes we're developing. And we're choosing then to develop a better theme, one that moves us in a positive direction. And number 3, in taking charge of your story, has to do with our identity. Know who you are in your story and who it is you hope to grow to be. Are you the hero? Are you the victim? Are you the villain? How you see yourself impacts the choices you make, and those choices directly impact where you end up in life. So let me ask you a couple questions tonight. Quick quiz, pop quiz. You didn't know you were going to have a quiz tonight. It's okay. I won't grade you. Do you see yourself as capable of reaching your goals and learning new skills to get there? Or do you believe that no matter what, you just don't have what it takes? Do you see yourself as a victim in a world that is out to get you? Or are you able to recognize those times when kindness and grace show up in your life big time? Undeserved favor, miracles. Are you able to love yourself and be kind to yourself, even when you aren't perfect, even when you mess up bad? Are you able to show compassion to yourself, or do you lash out at yourself, blame yourself, berate yourself, isolate, pull away, disconnect? Are you willing to work on things getting better? Are you willing to own what needs to be done? Or are you a chronic blamer, always finding ways to make your decisions somebody else's fault? Do you believe you are your largest mistakes? Or are you aware that you are greater and bigger than any one moment in time, period? Are you able to see yourself as deserving of love, of second chances, of getting back up, worthy of reaching your goals, and much, much more? Listen to me, many of us have such a hard time seeing ourselves as we really are. Valuable, lovable, and flawed. Most of us have the flawed part down. We get it. We know. But most of us are unable to connect to an understanding of ourselves as both flawed and still of value and still worthy of love. It's so important that we learn to connect to a more balanced and positive version of who we are in our story. And one of the things we need to do in order to do that is to learn to challenge our inner critic. We all have that inner critic. You know, that voice that's always judging us, always pointing out the worst, telling us how we don't measure up, don't stack up against this or that person, how we're screwing things up, how we aren't enough, we aren't pretty enough, we aren't together enough. You got to learn to challenge your inner critic. He shows up and says, you know, you blew it. You blew that interview big time. You're a loser. What a joke. You should have known better to go for that job. And you got to challenge that inner. You got to fact check him. Ask, is that true? Is that really true? And then inform your inner critic of what the truth really is. The truth is, the real story is, first of all, even if we did blow that interview, chances are it didn't go as badly as we think it did. And second, even if we did, at least we had the guts to go after the job. Even Michael Jordan missed some shots and lost some games. We're not losers because of one miss. No one hits it out of the park every time. We can acknowledge it. Yeah, that may not have been my most perfect, shining, ideal representation of who I wanted to be in that moment, but I'm okay. The world's still spinning. I'll figure out how to do it better next time around. You need to learn to challenge your inner critic and ask if that is true. Is it true all the time? Your inner critic's on a rant going off on you, saying you are so selfish. You are the most selfish person on the planet. How could you do that to your best friend? Why would they even want to hang out with you? You're a terrible person. You got to ask yourself, challenge your inner critic. Is that true all the time? I was selfish in this particular circumstance. I can own that. But I'm not a selfish person. I don't behave selfishly all the time. I let myself get carried away. I made a poor choice, but I will choose to allow this experience to teach me how to do better next time. I showed selfishness today. I can own that. But there are lots of times when I also show the opposite. You've got to challenge your inner critic. And one thing that is extremely helpful in this is literally to give that inner critic that little nagging voice that thing never shuts up and is always pointing out how you're messing up and how you're not enough. Give him or her a name, and preferably one that makes you laugh or is silly. The perfectionistic hag, the nag, the everything's a crisis worrywart, the grouchy gremlin, the gloomy Gus, the fault finder maximizer. You can figure out your own, but give it something. Understand that does not represent the truth. Treat everything, and I mean everything this inner critic tells you, like what it actually is, the rantings of fear and insecurity, and then speak truth to it. John 15, verse 16 says, "You didn't choose me, I chose you." God chose us. Knowing all of our faults, he chose us. We are loved, and that is the ultimate truth. We are good enough for the God who hung the stars in the sky, who put the Milky Way in place. We are good enough for the King of the universe. We are so valued that he sent his only son that we could be free. He chose us. And that, friends, is the ultimate and final truth. Tell your inner critic, yep, I'm flawed, but I'm also pretty awesome at times. And always, always, I am loved. God chose me. I'm closing now. We're almost out of time. I hope I've challenged you tonight to take a look at the story you are telling. Before you leave tonight, I want you to decide who you want to be in this world and decide to walk out these doors into the best of your ability with all the kindness and compassion and courage you can muster. Be that. And bring truth to your story. The truth is we are all flawed and beautiful. All of us, every one of us, imperfect, and yet perfectly loved. Isn't that amazing? Perfectly loved. Have the courage to own your mistakes, but be brave enough to refuse to be defined by them. Practice the things that make you proud to be you, and pass along the benefit of your experience to others. The bottom line is our story matters. We matter. God has a plan for each and every one of us, and none of us is here by mistake. You're not an accident. You may have been a surprise to somebody, but you weren't a surprise to God. He has a plan for your life. And before the world began, he looked down through all the years and time and said, you know what? I need a Gail at this point in time. I need a Maury in this point in time. There are gifts that he has that the world's going to need right about. There are people who are going to need his story. And beauty comes from brokenness. When we refuse to be defined by those moments, when we rise above, we give it all we've got. We get knocked down. We get back up. If God chose us and he chose us, surely we can learn to trust him that he will guide us to where we need to be while we are learning to be where we are right now. I want to take a moment. Everybody bow your heads and close your eyes. I hope this message has spoken to you. I hope it's prompted some of you guys to rethink the stories you're telling. I hope that you have an understanding of yourself as completely and totally, utterly loved by the God who created the universe. You're important to him. You matter to him. He has a plan for you, and your mistakes and your situations, the things that are your fault and that aren't your fault, have not somehow derailed that plan. You're not that powerful. He has a way to work every second of your story into something amazing. But we've got to start owning our choices. We've got to connect to him. Allow him to help us think different than we've thought before. Allow him to speak truth into our story. When your inner critic says you're never going to make it, look how many times you failed, you're a nobody. You've got to learn to connect to him and know his assurances of his hand on your life and fight back with, I'm a somebody. God chose me. If you're here tonight, I don't want you to leave without just this moment. If this message has spoken to you and there's a part of you that says, you know what, I want you to pray for me tonight, Virginia. I want to think better thoughts. I want to live a different story. I want to connect to this Jesus, to this God. And you've never done that before. You've never had that moment where you said, you know what, God, I'm turning it all over. You chose me and I'm going to choose you. I'm going to ask you to help me to walk beside me. If that's you tonight and you want to make that commitment, nobody is looking around. We're all family here. Well, just slip your hand up in a show of, you know, that's me. I want to start new. I want to tell a different story. I want to live a different story. I've got a friend that's going to put something in your hand that's going to help you. You know, we can all stand to reevaluate the stories we're telling. But you got to make sure, man, you know the author of your story. Your story was created by God himself, and there's nothing in this world you could ever do or have ever done that could alter his plan, his wonderful plan for your life. First, you got to trust him. Can we all say a prayer together with those that have raised their hands? We want to say as a show of solidarity, of being together and standing together as one unity. Let's pray together. Jesus, we're so thankful that you chose us. Thankful that you've written our story. We know you've intended it to be a beautiful one, and we accept you now. We accept your grace. We accept your love. We ask that you walk beside us every moment of every day. Help us live the story of a champion. When we fall, help us get back up. When we mess up, help us try again. Help us have the courage to refuse to be anything less than your child. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.